Okay, in video 3, we're going to be talking about should we have smaller stories or tasks, or how should we organize our work to be most effective for our teams. You remember now in video 1, we set up our sprint and started it. In video 2, we looked at how we should use JIRA within a daily scrum. So now we'll talk about the work itself. We're going to talk about what's the best way for work to be structured. Should we have a story per person? Should we use subtasks under a story to make things more specific? And one of the things that makes this so challenging, and the reason that I get asked this question all the time, is because really it depends. All right, this is one of those places where it depends on the team. It depends on how you guys work. And I think there's some key things you need to be thinking about as you're structuring your work. Really, it's about speed. It's about delivering the most work in the amount of time that a sprint commitment is. So talking about the fastest teams and thinking about the concepts that help teams be fast. It's really about focusing on the goals of the team, not the individual. And that's one of the things that's really challenging with this. You can structure your work in a way that has stories per person, but really it's about making sure that the team is operating optimally as a team, not as a group of individuals. One of the effects of swarming, which you see in the next item here, swarming on items to finish the most important work, is that when everybody comes together and works on an item, that's where we see the most speed. So whether it's UX and development and backend development and testers, all attacking one story and moving through that one and then attacking the next story and the next story and the next story, that's really the quickest way for the team to work as opposed to everybody working on their own thing. It helps to use past performance so that we keep commitments realistic. So we talked previously about using yesterday's weather as a barometer for how much work to commit to in a sprint. Now you can commit to more than that and maybe you'll complete it. But it's really about team motivation. If we commit to 10 points and we complete 12, that makes the team feel happy. If they commit to 15 and they complete 12, the team feels like they didn't do a good job, right? And that will actually demotivate the team. So that's the important piece here, is we want to make sure the team is motivated and excited about what they're doing. Also, if we can keep that commitment realistic, that will allow the team to commit and finish the work that they committed to early, and then they can pull more from that ready queue that we created, right? And that's really important as well, because now they're going to be delivering more than 100% of their commitment. Teams love that. The next item I have here is relative sizing instead of specific. So if people commit to, I'm going to work through this story for 8 hours, it's going to take me 8 hours, and then it takes 10, which is honestly very, very possible because it's very difficult to make exact sizing when you're creating those sizes for the stories. So using relative sizing allows us to not have to be on the hook for those specific time frames. So if a story has 3 points, then we're able to relatively size that against the other stories in the sprint. So a 3-point story is the same as a 3-point story, etc. I don't need to know whether that item is 6.5 hours or 8.5 hours. I know it's a 3. All right, and the last concept here is having T-shaped people. And that concept really means you can imagine a person with their arms outstretched to either side. They form what looks like a T. They're deep in a skill set in the middle of that T, and their arms represent 2 other skills that they might also have. The more we do to make our team cross-functional, the more we can increase the throughput of our team. Maybe that tester is also pretty good at process, and so they can help to serve as the scrum master. Or maybe we've got a UX designer who can also do some front-end coding. And that allows you to actually increase the speed when people swarm on a story. Okay, so let's take a look at JIRA and how JIRA would support those things. We'll talk through a couple of those concepts. All right, so moving back into our backlog, what's important to look at is that we talked about the fact that a board shows the smallest unit of work. So if you have a story in your backlog, we're going to work on this story, but what I really want to do is I want to create a task for UX, and I want to create a task for front-end development, and a task for back-end development. You can do that. So you will have a person that will be on the hook for the story overall, but then you could create subtasks, and that will allow you to capture each one of those tasks underneath. But again, remember, it's not about what's best for the individual, it's about what's best for the story and for the team overall. Now, if we want to track hours, we already talked previously about how when we move a story into done, we would decrement those 5 story points from the sprint. But if we want to track it in regards to hours, we can do that too. So you can see here when you select the item and you get this prompt that comes up here, this dialog, under show more, you see we can actually do time tracking as well. All right. So it's important to note that you can do this. Again, I think ideally the team should work in relative sizing. I think that over time that becomes more accurate and we can look at forecasting more effectively and things like that. But some teams do prefer to work in time. If you do, then what you can look at is the time spent on that and the time remaining. And then you would actually burn hours instead of story points in your burn down. So on the left where you would have story points, instead you would have hours, right? These are the number of hours that are required in order to finish our commitment. And then those hours would burn to 0, which means that as you finish each story, you would want to update the time spent and the time remaining in order to track that. That's how you would do that. So hopefully that helps. Figure out what's best for the team, experiment, and then that should be the way that you choose to handle your items in JIRA. In the next video, we're going to look at closing the sprint, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the sprint report and how that works.